Okay, we're just going to continue our series of mini lectures, kind of wrapping up and summarizing the chi-square test of independence. And let me remind you that with this cross tabulation table here, it pertains to this graph down here on the right, and this cross tabulation table here of the actual data, actually on page 293 of your text. This table corresponds to this graph down here. Okay. So while running the chi-square test of independence gives us a statistical p-value to conclude whether our two groups are equal to or different from one another, keep in mind there are things that we can do to begin to deduce for ourselves. Okay, for example, here it's obvious that the two groups are equal. 33.2 equals, or I'm sorry, 33.3 equals 33.3. Okay, over here, I mean, I can tell you just looking at these two numbers, 25% versus 43%. To me, I would say even without doing the chi-square test of independence, it seems like single people are quite a bit more likely than married people to drive a sports car. Okay, now I haven't done the chi-square test yet, but just eyeballing those two numbers, 25% and 43%, to me, that seems pretty far apart. So another thing that we can do, though, is build graphs, okay? And in this instance here, look at the graph on the right for a bit. These two bars on the left representing married people, and the two bars on the right representing single people, while these two bars are not exactly equal to these two bars in terms of height, the reason why these two bars don't exactly equal these two bars, okay, is because in our sample, there's more single people than there are married people. But if you look at these two bars here, this blue bar and this brown bar, proportionally, these two bars are the same as these two bars, okay? Here we've got 5 married people that own a sports car and 10 who don't, okay? So out of 15 married people, 1/3 own a sports car. Out of 30 single people, you've got 10 single people who own a sports car, 20 single people who don't own a sports car. Out of these 30 people, you've got 1/3 who own a sports car, 2/3 who don't. So another indicator when your two variables are independent of one another is when you build a graph, proportionally the two groups are the same. And that's what we have here. Proportionally, these two bars are the same as these two bars. Now compare that to this graph over here, and keep in mind, the graph on the left comes from this data here, okay? And you should just be able to eyeball this and see that with the married people, proportionally speaking, okay, the brown bar relative to the blue bar is a lot bigger than that same ratio for single people, okay? So this basically says for married people, proportionally, not very many of them own a sports car compared to proportionately the proportion of single people who own a sports car. If these two graphs, these two bars here compared to these two bars here, if in this graph, if these two bars proportionally were about equal to these two bars, then that would give us strong evidence. Even though we haven't run the chi-square test yet, that would give us strong evidence that our two variables are not related to one another. Okay? So now in the next mini lecture, we'll actually run the chi-square test. We'll actually run the chi-square test a couple of times and look at the output in a couple of different ways. Thank you.